Mrs. Kenny is a first grade teacher at a parish called St. Anne's, just a little bit north of us in Normandy, Missouri. And she was visibly moved one afternoon by the Stations of the Cross. The 8th graders were acting them out tableau style, taking an element of each station and freezing into that position as the story was proclaimed. It was at the 13th station where Mary holds the dead body of her son when Mrs. Kenny's tears began to flow. The first grader right next to her noticed that a little girl wrapped her hands around her teacher's arm and just rested her head there for a bit. After a while, she looked up and said, "Mrs. Kenny, can I say something that might help?" "Of course," she replied. The little girl looked at her and said, "He didn't stay dead." Out of the mouths of babes, the deep truths of Easter. He didn't stay dead. He didn't stay dead. Because of that one tiny, important detail, everything has changed, hasn't it? You see, if Jesus did not remain in the grips of death, if the tomb could not and would not hold this one life, then it will not hold us either. But not staying dead is so bigger than our physical death. Not staying dead has everything to do with our everyday living. You see, not staying dead means that there is a power within us that we can draw upon in any situation. And the power is this: we are born to rise. That is the great revelation of Easter. As our second reading proclaimed, like leaven in dough, this is in us. We, you and I, are meant to rise. We are made to rise. If there's anything that might help this broken world of ours, or our very broken lives, isn't it precisely this stunning little bit of news? Certainly we all know what it's like to be stuck. So many of us think we're condemned to the same vicious cycles happening over and over again. The ways we sabotage relationships, the ways we argue again and again about the same crazy things, the ways we're bound by creeping insecurities and old fears, and those self-destructive addictions of one sort or another. But it doesn't have to be that way. You see, we are made to rise. And so we can. What it takes to do that is in us. The Scriptures proclaim again and again that what happened to Jesus is the pattern of each of our lives. By His choices and His life, Jesus shows us what is possible for us in our everyday living. By His dying and rising, Jesus shows us that dying and rising is the pattern of each of our lives. That when death finds us, we have it in us to rise. Easter says that every child, no matter the circumstances they were born into, every teen or young adult, whatever their self-loathing or rejections or heartache, every dying person, no matter their suffering, was born to rise. It is in our nature to rise, to soar, to get up again after we've fallen down. It's in us to be freer tomorrow than we are today. It is in us from the very beginning, from the very creation of these little beings that we are. It's been in us from the very beginning to rise. And God is always calling that forth in us, in each of us, whatever our faith or lack thereof. God is calling that forth in us. It's at the core of every single human being on this planet. One of my priest buddies recently told me how out of control he was feeling these days. There's so many challenges going on in his parish and even in his own family right now. And he's not one to be scared often, but these days he's feeling quite vulnerable and frightened. He said that his temptation in response to all this is to push himself even harder and to somehow try to regain control of everything. He said, Gary, if I can just trust the great truth that I am meant to rise, I could let go now. I could find my peace. Oh, he said, I will do my part. I will always do my part. But I would also know that it doesn't all depend on me. We are all meant to rise someday. We each have our stories of rising to tell, don't we? You who tonight join our church in full communion through baptism and confirmation. For some of you, this was a harrowing decision. It took a long time. Fraught with family objections, perhaps, or your own doubts, or your own discouragements along the way. And those long Tuesday nights for 8 months studying this church of ours. But I got to tell you, in your own flesh tonight, you show us something of what it means to be able to rise from that, from all that. Certainly I have mine too. I remember what it was like to learn at the age of 36 that my 67-year-old mom, who was the picture of health just days before, had just a month or so to live. I remember feeling a fear like I had never known before. But perhaps the fruit of celebrating this feast, Easter after Easter, for all those years of my life up until then, somehow left me with a deep trust that I can rise from this loss, even with those fears, in ways I could have never imagined I could rise. And I did. And I am a better man and a better priest from having suffered her death. And because now I've been there before, when it is my turn to suffer again, I can remember that I've known this Easter deep, deep down truth before, and choose to trust as I go forward. To trust that Gary Braun was born to rise. So are you. So are you. You who are with us this Easter night, perhaps suffering from depression or even despair, for whom life feels very flat right now and without joy. Hope and meaning will find you again, because you're made to rise. You who are here tonight, who've been victims over the years of other people's sometimes horrible, always selfish choices, you can know again your own precious worth and your deep down inviolate goodness. And you who are paralyzed by some fear, you will discover that you are made for courage. You who are full of shame over your sins, over any sin, as you heard proclaimed in the Exalted so beautifully, we have a God who restores lost innocence. You can rediscover your innocence again. And you whose doubts haunt you, you will be standing tall, full-throated, singing your alleluias again. It's in you. And you who face your own impending death or the death of a loved one, you can find the confidence that you and they will be well in one way or another. You and they will be well. My friends, in other words, no matter what has happened to you or ever would, nothing can keep you from rising. And if you believe that there is any human being, including yourself, who is not capable of rising, then you don't get Easter. Because Easter says, you can do this. It is in you to do this. So as for Jesus, so it is for us to not stay dead, neither now nor at the hour of our death. You see, we are born